Ready.
Thank you for signing up for my Lucy Duffle bag class on August 10th from 1 p.m. until 6 p.m. at Kathy's down the block location. I'm going to talk to you about some pre-class prep work so that we can get straight to sewing in class that Sunday. This is the Lucy Duffle pattern that we'll be using, and you can buy it at Kathy's. The first thing that you're going to want to do is make a photocopy of the pull-out pattern. You can see here that it has all these little squares. On these squares, it talks about all the little pieces that we're going to cut beforehand so that we'll be ready to sew in class. You can see that I have some cut out here. I will be making some plastic templates out of these two things to make it easier to cut that day in class. The pattern calls for 1.5 yards of the main fabric, the lining fabric, and by Annie's Soft and Stable. What you will do is sandwich all three together. So here's my main fabric. Here's an example of Soft and Stable. By the way, Kathy sells this by the yard at our down the block location. There are other products that are very similar to this, but it is nice to get it in one big piece. And then you will put the lining fabric underside. You're going to quilt it all how you prefer. If you have a long arm, you can quilt it as one big piece. If you don't, on page 2 in the pattern, it talks about a more manageable way to cut it into 2 pieces for quilting on your machine. Once you have quilted this big piece, page 3 in the pattern talks about the smaller quilted pieces that you're going to cut from the one big piece. And as you can see, I don't have my piece quilted yet, but that's what all these little tabs are for. So once I cut out the little pieces, I will put the squares on them. After you do that, you will want to go and proceed to cut out all the pieces of webbing. There's 3 different pieces, and you can see that I've labeled them, and I've just clipped them together to make them more manageable until we use them in class. The 2 pieces of fold over elastic and the 2 pieces of mesh. Next, you want to cut the exterior accent fabric following either the chart on page 1 in the pattern or the spatial diagram on the top of page 2 in the pattern. Next, you'll want to cut the exterior accent fabric following either the chart on page 1 of the pattern or the spatial diagram on top of page 2 in the pattern. As you can see, there are not that many pieces, and I've done the same thing. Once I cut them, I pin the piece so that it'll make it easier for me to find when it's time for sewing. The very last thing you need to do for class is the bias binding. I use the same fabric this is considered the interior accent fabric. I use the same fabric as my lining fabric to do that. The only piece that you need to cut from that interior accent fabric is this 22-inch square. Once you cut the 22-inch square, you're going to cut it on the diagonal right along the 45. Now, the pattern does not describe very well how you get to sewing this together to make the bias binding, and I'm going to show you a little magic trick. So without flipping any of the pieces over or rotating them, we're going to just simply change the position they're in. So I'm going to move this one up, and then I start moving them so that the piece that had been on the right is now on the left, and the piece that had been on the left is now on the right. Now you are going to seam this long straight seam. It will look very similar like this when it's sewn together. What you will do is then it's going to be sewn together. You're going to rotate it, and using one of your rulers, make 2.5-inch marks across your fabric this way, because this has now become our bias. You will cut those out. You're going to want to seam all the pieces together to make continuous binding. If you get all that prepared before class, I feel confident that we will be really close, if not getting the bag completed in class. If you have any questions, please contact me at cecilia@kathys.com. Thank you.